Hello, everybody. Hopefully everybody can see us and hear us. We are live on LinkedIn right now. So I am just going to make sure that everybody is good in terms of the setup. But first of all, welcome. Welcome to our Soulcast Media Live. We are live here on LinkedIn, and I'm looking at the chat right now, and it is just fantastic in terms of the where people are coming from. Gemma, I don't know if you can see this right now, but I'm just going to list off where some people are watching from. We have people in New York, we have people in England, in the United Kingdom, London, France, Australia, Turkey, India, Madrid. Oh my gosh, it is just incredible where people are dialing in from. So whatever time zone you're in, I'm here in California, so it's our morning. Gemma, who's in London, it's your evening right now. But Just want to welcome everybody to this session. So for those who don't know, this is a session where Gemma and I are going to be talking about a topic close to both of our hearts. It's about powerful mindset and powerful communicating. A very quick introduction of who I am and who Gemma is. So my name is Jessica Chen. I'm the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, and we are a business communications agency where we teach people public speaking, interpersonal communications, just really important soft skills, communications related. So that's a little bit about who I am, but I want to invite Gemma here, who is also a fellow LinkedIn Learning instructor, which is actually how we first connected. Gemma, please tell everybody who you are, what you do, so we can get to know you.
Thank you. Hi, hello everyone that's here. So my name is Gemma and I am a chartered psychologist, and my area of focus is resilience. So building psychological resilience, understanding how to overcome challenges, how we can build our resilience to help us thrive in the future, improve well-being, improve performance. And I talk a lot about emotional intelligence as well in that kind of bracket. And there's a big link between emotional intelligence and communication, which is what we'll probably be talking a little bit about today. So I run the Resilience Edge, which is a organization that helps people to boost their resilience.
Yes. And, to be honest, the way I found Gemma was not only did I watch her fantastic LinkedIn Learning courses, but I really resonated a lot with Gemma, what you talk about emotional intelligence, because like you said, it's very much closely linked to communications, because good communications is very much about people, understanding how they're feeling, being relatable, right? So before we dive into some questions, because I certainly have a lot of questions for you and hopefully tips that people who are watching can take away from, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask as Gemma and I are talking, feel free to throw it into the chat function. I'll leave some time, maybe like 10 or 15 minutes before our session ends, to answer any questions you may have or any thoughts that you want to share with us. So leave it in the chat function. We're reading it all and we will answer it at the end. And just so you know, the session's going to be about 40 minutes or so. So if you guys have any, notes you want to take down, this is the time. So just to get started, Gemma, one of the things that I do want to ask you, and this is really, why you and I are here today. Why does emotional intelligence and having really good emotional intelligence have to do, in your opinion, with being a good communicator? What have you seen in your studies and your research?
Well, one of the facets of emotional intelligence is relationship building. So that's kind of the final thing that we focus on when we're talking about building emotional intelligence. So generally we start looking inwards, first of all, thinking about like understanding yourself, first of all. So it's that self-awareness piece. And then understanding how your emotions impact how you interact with people. So thinking very much kind of looking inwards. But the second part of emotional intelligence is then looking outwards and thinking about, first of all, understanding relationships with others, managing those, building those, making them strong, but also having that social awareness as well. So understanding what's going on around you, the dynamics at play around you, getting feedback from others, whether that be through like explicit feedback that someone might give you or picking up on cues, sometimes what other people's body language is telling you or what their tone's telling you. That's all parts of emotional intelligence, because it's all very well understanding yourself, and that's definitely a place to start. But ultimately it's about, especially in a work environment, how you then impact others and how you manage your emotions, how you deal with your emotions, how you respond to events, and how that can impact relationships either positively or not so positively if it's not going so well.
So I think, the great thing about emotional intelligence is I think in the last 20 years or so, people have gotten a lot more conscious and aware that, hey, this is something that's out there that is not just about intelligence, right? Book smarts. Is emotional intelligence something people can learn, they can get better at, and how? How can they do that?
100%, it's something you get better at. I think that some people will find it naturally easier than others, for sure, like anything in life. We all have our preferences, we've got different personalities. our mindsets are very different. So we'll all have things that we're naturally great at and things that we have to work at. But the great thing about emotional intelligence is that actually you can build it over time. And that's been proven in research as well, that there are ways that you can build that. So I guess initially it's about, I always think whenever you're changing something or building something or developing in an area, the first step really is about self-awareness. So understanding where you are, how do you react to events? If we think about from a communication perspective or a relationship perspective, are there certain people that bring out the best in you and other people that perhaps don't bring out the best in you in terms of how you interact? And similarly, are there situations that bring out the best in you and other situations that time and time again don't bring out that best side in terms of your communication? So I think, first of all, it's about understanding what's going on there. So what is it about that person or that relationship or that situation which is causing you to react in the way that you are? What are you feeling? What are you experiencing? And then you can kind of dig a little bit deeper and think, okay, why is that? Are there patterns? What can you learn from kind of reflecting about yourself and how you manage your emotions? And the next thing is to think about, okay, how good are you at picking up on social cues? Again, some people find this really easy and some people have to work at it a little bit. And most of us are somewhere in between, to be honest. It depends on the day, it depends on what's going on. But, do you, when you're in a social situation, do you find it easy to pick up on, who's interacting with who and what's going on beneath the surface? Or do you need things to be a bit more explicit? One of the ways that I always recommend kind of boosting social awareness is really focusing on your senses. So what can you actually see? What can you hear? What can you, before we start to go into like intuition and like the feeling you get about a situation, if you're wanting to focus on building your social awareness, start with the senses. That's definitely the place to start. And I guess the final thing is getting feedback. So ask people around you for feedback. How do they interpret your communication? How do they feel about your relationship? What do they think you could do even better? What advice have people got? Because that's often where we pick up great tips. And sometimes people, and the other thing to think, and you'll know this anyway, 100%, but one of the other things to think about with communication is so the message that we communicate isn't necessarily the message we want to communicate. That's how the other person takes it. So the message you send out isn't necessarily the message received. So it's really important to get feedback about how you're coming across, because you might have a certain intent that you want to come across in a specific way, but maybe the person listening isn't seeing that or hearing that or feeling that. So that's always really interesting to get feedback from others about how you come across or how they describe your communication. And then you can work on building kind of, I guess, aligning your intent a bit more with the actual message that people receive if you need to.
Yeah, no, so basically what I kind of like picked out when you were talking about is, just being aware of your senses in terms of how are you feeling in that environment, right? So that self-awareness that you mentioned is key. But the other thing that you mentioned was, asking people for feedback. How are they feeling when they are communicating with you? Do they feel that you come off as very aggressive, or are you a very direct person, right? Because a lot of times we don't really know how we're coming off when we're communicating. This actually reminds me of, there is a difference between impact and intent, right? I don't intend to hurt you or, to be so direct, but that's in fact the impact you're having on me, right? That's what I'm feeling. So there is that difference between impact and intent. And I think, just being mindful of that. So I work with a lot of, one-on-one folks when it comes to their communications. And a lot of people have said to me, I'm afraid if I come off as too nice or too warm. So like these like soft communications things that we're talking about. I'm afraid if I come off this way, people won't see me as being an authoritative person. Do you think that if somebody is, nice and warm, they therefore take away that authority, that leadership capabilities? Or do you think it really has nothing to do with that?
I think the world's changing. And I think traditionally that's probably how we think of leadership. It's a little bit more autocratic and directing teams, you know, and having that, I guess, being able to make decisions and being very fixed in how a team should respond to something or how a business should be run. And I think the world's changing. And I think we've learned that the working world's definitely changing. And we've definitely learned that over the last year, for sure. And I think, you know, when we think about leaders now, it's evolving. And I think people are much more drawn to kind of compassionate leaders, authentic leaders. And, you know, if you are a leader in an organization or in a team, understanding that you're not going to have all the answers. You can't always, especially now, we don't, because no one has all the answers. We don't know, you know, we've never faced these situations before. So it is a work in progress. We're learning as we go. And I think being honest about that and being clear that you're not trying to have all the answers. Well, if you are trying to do that, you're probably going to end up in a bit of a sticky situation. I think this is the perfect time to be a bit more honest about, we're all learning, it's a work in progress, we're going to test things, we're going to be very strategic about what we're doing, how we're responding, but you know, we are testing this, we don't know, and I don't know as a leader. So I think it's that kind of leadership that people are much more drawn to today, rather than the traditional very assertive. And I'm not saying you can't be assertive, but there is this more kind of compassionate side, this more approachable side. And I think that's coming out a lot more now. So I do, but then I also appreciate that if you're in the middle of a crisis or you need to make big decisions, your team are watching you, and they want to know that you're being taking very considered action and you're creating a direct path. But equally, I think now is the time to also be honest about, this is what I think right now, based on the information we have and based on where we are, this looks like the plan of action. This is what we're going to do. But equally, you know, think about growth mindset, for example. That's another one of the topics I talk about a lot. Understanding there's always more to learn. No one's an expert. No one's an expert in being a leader. We, you know, even leaders that have been doing for years still need to adapt their style. They need to change depending on the events going on around them. So I think it's really important to incorporate some of that. But I do totally get that traditional view of being assertive. And also, you've got to find a style that works for you as well. You know, we're individuals and we're people. And I think that's also becoming a lot more acceptable, I guess, and expected, that we get to see a little bit of people's actual personalities, which I think is a really positive thing. But I do understand why people would think, you know, to be a leader. And also think back traditionally as well. If we go back 50 years, all leaders were male, practically, you know, and that kind of more, I guess, because then, you know, if we get into personalities, there are different traits that we think are more typically male, more typically female. Whether that's right or wrong these days, who knows? And you know, the world is changing. Thankfully, we're all developing and evolving. So that's how a lot of us think in the back of our heads about what a leader is, and that's going to affect communication. And I think so many leaders think, I have to communicate in this way to be an effective leader, or to be seen to be an effective leader. But I would actually challenge that now and say, how can you be the most effective leader that you are, taking into account the person you are? And I think that's way more important today.
I think what you said, totally important in the terms of, you know, I do think, you know, perhaps 30 years ago, leadership looked this way, but I do feel, and I strongly feel, that the future of leadership is that compassionate leadership, right? It's knowing that whoever is leading the company, whether it's you or someone who you admire, that they show that care, right? And I think that's what people want, at least if it's not already starting. I do think that is what's going to be the future, which also kind of brings me to the point of where you said, but people also need leaders who are also very clear, right? You're giving directions, you know that direction. So as a leader, you cannot take that passive role, right? So I guess I'm always thinking, what is that balance, right? What's the balance between being warm yet being also, and I don't want to use the word forceful, but also, you know, making sure that people are following through. And when I think about that, I think as a leader, you have to communicate that whatever it is that you are directing people to do, it's for, you know, the greater good, right? Like, it's not just about me as a leader. It's not just about you. It's about us doing this together collectively, right? And that is why we are pursuing this direction, or we're going this way, right? So I think communications obviously is a huge part of that, and just, you know, showing empathy, right? And just showing that warmth, right? And this is kind of why I brought up this topic. It's because I feel like I've talked to some, you know, people who are definitely more of the traditional mindset, like, oh, I have to come off a certain way. I have to be very stern. I have to be very like this way in order for people to respect me. But I actually say, you know, I think a lot of it is people appreciate personality. People want to see that smile. People want to see that, right? I don't know. What do you think, Gemma?
100%. And I think, you know, I think about the leaders that inspire me, or people I've worked with that I think are great leaders. And without doubt, every single one of them that I think are a great leader has shown their personality, without a doubt. And have been themselves as well. And again, it's not about being perfect. You know, none of us are perfect, fully formed humans, you know, as evolved as we ever can be. We're all on a journey. We're all trying to do our best. But I think being relatable is so important, because if you like think about it, if you're in the middle of a crisis and you want someone to help you, I'm much more likely to help someone that I understand, respect, like potentially, rather than someone who I don't feel like has my best interests at heart, or has never really taken the time to build a relationship, has just kind of told me what to do. Someone that is authoritative, doesn't take into account any other opinions. I'm far less likely to put my neck on the line for someone like that than someone that I actually respect, understand. You know, they might have to make hard decisions and might make decisions that I don't necessarily agree with, or might impact me even. But like you said, if they're communicating the reasons why, and I understand that, I'm much more likely to go out of my way to do a better job working with someone like that.
I totally agree. So actually, for those who are joining right now, I just want to do a really quick reintroduction of, you know, what we're doing here on LinkedIn Live. So right now, I'm here with my friend Gemma. We're both LinkedIn learning instructors. Gemma is an expert on emotional intelligence. I do a lot of communications courses and teaching on communications. So we are here right now because both of us are just talking about two topics we're both very passionate about. And that is really, what is the link between having that right mindset, that good mentality, good way of thinking in order for you to be a better communicator. So with that, I kind of want to bring it back into, so Gemma, and we've already talked about how emotional intelligence, fortunately, is something that people can learn, people can develop and improve on. So if we're thinking about communications, what would you say are like the top things people need to know in order to, set their mind in the most beneficial way to prepare them to be better communicators? What should they be thinking? What should they like pretty much run through their mind before they start communicating?
Well, from my perspective, so from a psychology perspective, 100% people need to think about the other person or the people hearing the message. What do they want to hear? What do they want to hear? What do they expect to hear? What motivates them? How are they feeling right now? What's going on in their lives? Because I think so often when we think about communication, we think about the message we're trying to get out in the world. And that really isn't what communication is. The communication is the message the other person receives. Because and we can't always control that. There's lots of factors that go in between kind of our intent and the message that's received. But a really good step, really helpful step, is to put yourself in that other person's shoes. So, for example, are you communicating to your team who have you had loads of changes going on? Are they worried about their jobs? Are they worried about the industry? Have they had any home challenges going on? We're talking collectively here. I'm not talking about going through every single individual. I'm just talking in general. So tailoring your message to make sure that actually you're framing it in the right way, you're being sensitive where you need to be. Or if it's a difficult message, you call that out, that it's a difficult time and this is a difficult message, and it might not be something that you even want to communicate yourself, but actually it's important and this is what's going on, or it's important to be honest, or it's important to be truthful. But I think framing the message from the other person's point of view is really, really important. And you won't always get that 100% right, because we don't know exactly what every single other person is thinking. But it's just quite good practice, I think, when you're sitting down, jotting out, I often write down before I start communicating, like what the key points are, when you're
Yeah.
thinking about that, before anything else, before thinking about what you want to say, what the key points are, what the top message is, and before any of that, just take a moment to think about, okay, imagine I'm the person or the
Mhm.
team receiving this message. Where am I right now? And what am
Mhm.
I going to respond to or not respond to?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it kind of brings me back to, so prior to starting Soulcast Media, I was a news reporter. So in the US, I worked at ABC, NBC, just kind of all across the country. And one of the things that we were taught to be a better journalist was to always ask us, why does this matter, right? Why should the viewers care about this? Because at that point, our audience, they're the viewers, right? So why should the viewers care about this particular story that you are doing today? And always reminding ourselves as we're writing the story, because in the end we have to think about, the consumers at that point. For me at that point it was viewers, but in our work today, when I'm interacting with folks, my consumers are people who really want to understand and learn communications. So you said it, you literally said it, it's all about remembering who your audience is and tailoring your message to what they care about, right? And that's
Mhm.
where the work comes in, right? It's like you yourself, the content, right? You know the information, you know the research, but really the work is, okay, how can I say this so that it resonates with who I'm speaking with? And if you are, for example, talking to a more broad audience, perhaps you have to kind of like take 100-foot step back and then craft the message. But if you're talking to an audience who is a little bit more technical, right, then you also
Mhm.
have to change your messaging. The ultimate message may be the same, but it's like
Mhm.
tailoring your message depending on who you're speaking with so it really resonates. And isn't that just what it means to be an effective communicator, that your message resonates, right? So that's
I
kind of,
think so.
yeah.
And it's hard work. Like, no one's saying that's easy. Like,
No, it's not.
and it takes time. And I think it sometimes takes way more time than we think it's going to. Like, half of my life is creating messages of some kind, whether it be kind of content or videos or courses or whatever.
Yeah.
That's, most, I had to say, because we know, most of us know our stuff, whatever, even if you're starting out at work, you have some knowledge about your role in your industry and your area of expertise, or the stuff that the hard bit is putting it together in a way that other people care,
Yes.
like, and
Actually,
that's what communication is. You're right, you're totally right.
totally. It's so funny because actually yesterday we were just talking about this prior to this, Gemma, that I had a call with the LinkedIn Learning team because I'm in the process of putting together 2 new courses. And we have our table of contents that we are putting together, and then the team was like, okay, but Jessica, who is this for? And initially I was like, it's for professionals, it's like everybody. And they're like, no, like, who is this for? Like, who is going to get the most out of it? And it's like, it just hit me. It's like, yeah, sometimes I also need to be reminded of that so that my communications can be more succinct as well.
But that's also a really good example of feedback as well.
Mhm.
Like, even someone that's an expert, like, on communication, like, knows their stuff, you're still like, actually, that's really valuable feedback. And I think that's really, really important point, because often when I work with leaders, who are experts in their field, they've been doing this stuff for years. It's quite hard sometimes to help people, like, especially when we talk about growth mindset, for example. It's really hard to convince people that you still need to learn, you still need to grow, you still need to get feedback, because often we think,
Mhm.
well, God, I've been doing this years, I kind of know it inside out. The thing is, you don't know everything, and the world's changing, and
Mhm.
we certainly don't know what's coming our way. So I think that feedback, that part, is really important, but also that's quite challenging as well sometimes.
Yeah. So, Gemma, I have to ask you, actually backing up a little bit, what made you decide to get into, the whole like resilience edge, having that powerful mindset, teaching people emotional intelligence? What compelled you to want to teach this subject and research it really?
Oh, wow. Um, so I think I just think this is the job that I was supposed to do. And it's taken quite a lot of twists and turns to figure that out, I think. And I've always kind of taken like a step closer, if that makes sense. Like, I've made a change, got a step closer, been like, it needs to be a little bit more of this, and kind of taken those steps. But so even when I was really little, I'm obsessed with biographies and autobiographies. So I would, even
Mm.
at primary school, like really tiny, I would read books about people. So things that people had done or achieved. And I guess looking back, I didn't really know it at the time, but looking back, I was always really interested in kind of how people did it. Like, I'm much more interested in the journey when I'm
Yeah.
reading about someone than when they get to like that success. And don't get me wrong, obviously we all want to get to that success point, whatever it is for us. Um, but I, as a like, that was me, I guess, becoming a psychologist, like
Mhm.
understanding, okay, what were the steps that someone took, and also why did someone make that choice and not that choice, and someone else would do it differently, and if you did do it differently, could you still get to the same endpoint? And does it really matter? Like, do we learn as we go? And I'm really interested in how people achieve things they want to achieve in their lives.
Mhm.
I don't care if it's, reading about, I've read the weirdest biographies, but, I don't care if it's some obscure musician from the 70s or someone that's gone into space, or that bit doesn't really bother me so much. It's more like how someone did it. So I think that was my initial kind of getting into psychology. And
Mhm.
then I studied psychology. So I went to university and studied psychology, and realized that I'm also quite passionate about work. I don't know why. Like, that's something obviously slightly odd about me. But I thought about all the different kinds of psychology, and there's so many that interest me, like educational psychology and clinical and counseling psychology. But I just didn't want to work in those fields. And I loved kind of the work psychology.
Mhm.
Why do some people perform at work and others don't? And why are some people motivated and others aren't? And what makes a great working life? And why is it so individual? And all those questions. Um, so then I kind of started on the path of becoming an occupational psychologist. So, like, more studying and chartership, and then I guess you kind of take another little step forward, and then I was like, okay, so in the world of work, which are the bits that interest me? And it was coping with challenges and thriving, and how
Mhm.
does that happen? And it kind of just slowly kept building,
Mhm.
and all these topics like emotional intelligence and resilience and growth mindset,
Mhm.
all of those kind of come together. So that's kind of how I ended up doing what I'm doing, really.
So as as you were talking about that, I just thought about one point that I realized that I talk to a lot of my clients about, and that is the fear of speaking up. It's a
Mhm.
real thing. The fear
Oh,
of
yeah.
speaking up because they're afraid of sounding silly, or perhaps they said something once, it wasn't, received really well. So therefore, they just decided that it's better to just kind of keep their mouth shut and just go about the world that way, or let's say at least the working world that way. Okay. So like
Mhm.
a lot of them struggle with finding that confidence in figuring out how they can speak up. A lot of what I do, and I'm definitely going to want to ask you about this, is for me, it's like I always am telling them it's, perhaps you did have a bad experience. Perhaps you did say something funny and people did not respond. But just think of it as that's that one time, and people don't remember these things. They really don't remember these things. People are
Mhm.
so focused on what they're thinking, what they have to do, that fumble that you had, people aren't going to remember. And for me, I tell people this because I'm trying to basically share with them that experience, that one experience or one or two experience should not hold you back from feeling confident in what you want to say and then saying it. What do
Mhm.
you think when it comes to, because you talked about resilience, right? Feeling resilient when you are also feeling like you're struggling with that. How do you kind of reconcile the two?
It can be really hard. And I think
Yeah.
specifically public speaking or speaking
Yeah.
up in public is such a hot topic. I mean, isn't it one of the biggest fears
Yeah.
across like
Like the
the
top
general
here.
population that people have? And I've certainly been in that position for sure. Um, and I think part of resilience is learning from what's going on. So, and I have to work on this as well sometimes, in that, um, like, what's good enough? I will never ever film a LinkedIn learning course. I will never create a coaching course. I will never write something that I think,
Mhm.
wow, that was perfect. I totally nailed every bit of that.
I
Never.
totally feel that way.
100% never. I struggle to watch myself back. I hate reading stuff that I've written. And yeah, so but the point is, so I've had to get to the point where I think, okay, it's good enough. And do you know what? It's not perfect. Like, I'm actually not a journalist. I'm not a trained writer.
Yeah.
I'm writing how I think, how I'm thinking, or what's going on, and that's okay. I'd recommend other people think of it like this as well. In that, people are not going to read every single word and remember every word I wrote. They're not going to remember every word I said. They're
Yep.
going to remember the feeling of, that was interesting, or I like that person, or I resonate with that, or we get so hung up on exact phrases or words, or did I get it exactly right, that we can hold ourselves back. And the problem with that is, if you start waiting for things to be perfect and waiting until you are perfect at communicating, you will never communicate. That's an absolute fact. I don't think any of us feel like we're done on that front. Like, yeah, I'm done. I'm a great communicator. I'm like, I've nailed it all. Well, very few people feel like that. So the problem is, you're going to hold yourself back. And what's going to happen with that is, any message you could have something amazing to share with people, and you're not going to do it. That's going to stay in you, and no one's ever going to get a chance to hear that, be motivated by that, resonate with that. Feel like, God, that person's in the same position as me, or they think the same thing as me. So even though there might be other people listening or watching or reading what you've written, any kind of communication, that may not agree with you, they might think the complete opposite. They might even think like you're a bit of an idiot, like you're not their cup of tea. Well, that's an English phrase. You're not their kind of person. But for everyone that feels like that, there's someone else that thinks, that was amazing, or actually, I'm really glad that wasn't perfect, because I'm not perfect either. And it's really refreshing to see someone that's a leader, for example, look a bit nervous or stumble over some words, or, they're human too. And I think it's reframing how you look at it. Think about people that inspire you. There's loads of people that I've watched talk that get things wrong or miss things, or because they're human. And actually, it doesn't mean I like them any less, or it doesn't mean I don't agree with what they're saying, or it doesn't mean I don't hear the message. I still hear it. And, in life, very few things are that important that, it's not life or death. We're not doing surgery on someone. It's not, we're just trying our best. And I think, try and remember that as well about yourself. You're trying your best. We're all learning as we go, and there's always more to learn. And that's a good thing. So even if you do feel like you messed up a situation or an interaction, or didn't quite get things right, okay, it's painful. And don't get me wrong, I feel that pain when it happens. Like you make spelling mistakes somewhere, or you replied something, you're like, oh, that was the wrong tone, or I got the person's name wrong, and I'm like, oh, why do I do this? Like, slow down, or, and then I'm like, hang on a sec. I am trying my best. Like, there's a lot going on, and I'm a human, and I'm trying my best. So I think, focus on the intent of what you're trying to do, rather than the exact how it's going. And I guarantee people connect with that.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to the whole resilience you're talking about. And the great thing about emotional intelligence, like you yourself knowing that, oh man, if you screwed up, if you said that word, or if you came off a way that you didn't want to come off, but it's like being aware and being kind to yourself, right?
100%.
It's okay.
And even if you have totally messed up, still be kind to yourself, because I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose. And, you can try your best to repair it. And if you can't, that's a learning lesson, and it will help you in the future somehow.
This reminds me of, people are afraid of things like public speaking that we're talking about, or just, speaking up in general. And this reminds me of this idea of, if this is something you're afraid of speaking up, public speaking, one of the best ways to overcome that fear, that anxiety, is to actually expose yourself to those situations and actually basically challenge yourself to do it. So, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of people tell me that, they themselves are afraid of public speaking, but because they know that that is something that they're afraid of, and they choose for it to be something that they want to improve, they want to expose themselves to those situations where, yes, they do feel some anxiety, but they know that through those exposures, through those practice, they will get better at speaking. And I will tell, everybody who's watching right now, even though I teach communications, I am still learning how to be a better communicator. I feel like this is a never-ending journey. And the reason why it's never ending is because the situations you're in is always different. The people you're interacting with is always different. Their needs are different. So for me to think that I'm communicating in just this one linear way is the right way, that is not right either, right? So I just have to always remind myself that communications, being a good communicator, is a journey. So for those who are actually on this chat right now, we're going to be wrapping up soon, which for you guys, if you guys have any questions, I know this, Gemma, this literally flew by. I can't believe it's like 40 minutes already. I know we're just like chatting and having fun. But if anybody has any questions, to throw it into the comment section, the chat function. We'll spend some time answering your questions, but it's great to see people who are on here literally from all over the world. So I just want to say thank you for chiming in. But, as we kind of close this topic of powerful mindset, powerful communicating, Gemma, is there anything else that you want people to know? If there's one thing that they can perhaps write down on their notepad as they're listening to us talk, what's something that you would want them to walk away with?
The number one thing I think about when I'm communicating is, and I've mentioned it a couple of times today, is intent. So focus on your intent. Don't worry so much about getting the exact words right. Don't worry so much about whether it comes out in the exact way you want it to. Go back to your intent. What is it you really want people to understand or to know or to connect with? And then trust yourself that you will find a way of building that message in. Don't worry about the exact words. And I guess the other tip, is feedback. So get feedback from others. How do you come across? Well, and if you're uncomfortable about asking for feedback, because that's another one of my topics, the really good question to ask people is not what did I do wrong or what wasn't great, because sometimes people get a bit uncomfortable answering that. I do. If someone asks me, I'm like, oh, I don't want to say anything negative. But ask the question, what could I do even better? Because that's saying you might still be doing things really well, but you could do a slight tweak to make it even better. And these are just then ideas, and because it's a much more positive way of asking for feedback, it's more likely that you're going to get some good feedback from people, some good ideas.
So that's a really good tip. And actually, I'm just going to ask some of the questions that I'm seeing on my end that people are asking. So this one is from Samantha. Thank you, Samantha, for submitting your question. So your question is, how to overcome virtual interview anxiety? So I have a few thoughts about that, but Gemma, do you have any thoughts about how to overcome that anxiety in those virtual interviews? Because that's what a lot of people are actually doing right now, these virtual interviews.
I'd be interested to know if the anxiety is any greater because it's virtual, or if it's kind of interview anxiety in general. Because let's be honest, no matter what interview you're in, there's always going to be a certain level of anxiety because you don't know, it's unknown. You don't know what you're going to be asked, and if you're going to perform, and if you're going to connect, and if you're going to say the right thing. Again, I'm going to go back to it. Try and focus on your intent. So rather than coming up with the exact right example or the exact answer they're looking for, always focus on what it is you're trying to convey. Also, back in the days when, before I was doing my own thing and I'd go for interviews and things, I always asked loads of questions in the interview. So you've got your general asking about the company and team and that kind of stuff. So you've got a level of interest there. You're trying to find out more. But I'd often ask, does that answer the question? Or is there anything else I can add? Or is there anything else you want to hear more of? Or did I cover that? Because sometimes people say, actually, we were kind of looking for a bit more detail, or you're kind of looking for a bit more of this. And then you can kind of move back around to where they want the conversation to go. So I'd ask questions to kind of check I was on track for where they wanted to go, if that makes sense.
That's a really good tip. I think, preparing to ask them questions is a great way to show them that you're engaged. So my answer to this kind of question, virtual interview anxiety and how to overcome it, is to not let that anxiety control you, in the sense that, okay, accept that you're feeling anxious, right? I'm all about letting those emotions, for example, yesterday I did a huge corporate training. I've done this training many, many times, but I still get anxious because I know it's a new audience. People don't really know who I am, and I still have to perform in that way of delivering the message, right? So I still felt anxiety, but how did I use that anxiety so that it didn't, basically, hurt me? I use it as energy. In the sense of okay, all this bubbly butterfly feelings that I have in my stomach, instead of just, letting it tense me up, I'm I just let myself feel it, and then take that into, smiling and just being positive and being excited about this opportunity. I really feel, especially when it comes to virtual, people want to feel that excitement and that energy, because a lot of times when people get on these calls, everyone is just kind of all right, another video call, but if you come on and you're I'm so excited to be spending this time with you. I'm very excited to learn about your company. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about myself and why I think I can be a very good fit. Oh my gosh, the whole energy and the excitement, that just changes. So for me, I think, we talked about intention. That for me would be an intention of just making sure that I'm not letting it affect me in a negative way, but taking it as a positive energy. So hopefully that answered your question, Samantha. Some other questions that we are getting right now is, we're actually getting a lot, so I'm just gonna kind of go through them. The next one is how to better convey a message. Overall, how do you better convey a message? And I'll go first since this is kind of more of a communications question, but Gemma, you can chime in afterwards. So the way I think about conveying a message is literally what we were just talking about. Think about your audience first. Think about what is it that they care about? What is it that you think that they want to hear? And how do you think you can translate what you know, right? What you have in here in a way that will resonate with them. Are they more of a technical person? Are they like a broader audience like we talked about? So just stepping back and understanding that, okay, assuming that, they are this kind, when they know this much, once I know that, then let me tailor it so it really resonates with them. That's kind of how I see it. It's always about audience first. And that is how I truthfully approach all communications, all conversations. Gemma, do you have anything to add?
I think that's a great tip. I think you're totally right. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about what they want to hear and how it's going to make sense for them. And sometimes you have to step outside the box and move away from your technical knowledge and translate it in a way that an everyday person can absorb that information and find it useful. I think that's a brilliant tip.
So the next question that we have is from Edward. This is actually a very interesting one. So I'm going to just read it out loud. When dealing with different types of leaders in an organization, does this create an imbalance in emotional intelligence? Does this affect one's authenticity as to adapt in a current or in multiple leadership types? So what are your thoughts about that?
It's really interesting. And I can see where that question's coming from. So if you're adapting yourself to different situations, does that mean you're not being yourself and not being authentic? And I think it's a balance, if I'm honest. I think that you have to weigh up still being yourself, but also people are much more likely to connect with you and listen to your message if you're adapting it for that person as well. So it's not about not being you. It's not about being who that person wants you to be. It's about just understanding who they are. So you can still be, so I can be myself in lots of different situations. For example, back when you could go out and leave the house, we're in lockdown again in the UK, and probably pre-children as well, and I could actually go out in the evening. I might be a different person on a Friday night having a glass of wine with my friends than I would be delivering a corporate training event on a Monday morning. I'm still the same person, and I still hope that in that corporate formal world they can still see my personality. I just may not show every single aspect of it. I just might tailor how I come across, but there will be core things about me that no matter who you were talking to, no matter what situation I'm in, hopefully that still comes across. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but I think stick to your core values, who you are. You should never have to change that. And if you do have to change that, maybe that's not the right situation to be in. That's going to work for you long term. But it's about tailoring how that then comes across to different people, if that makes sense.
I agree. I completely agree. I think, we're not linear in the sense that we have different sides to us. So just because we're showing this one side, we're adapting to that situation, that doesn't necessarily take anything else away from us, right? But like you said, it's just about being confident in your values, what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to give up even, right? So just being clear about that within yourself, and then being moldable, adaptable in those situations. There's nothing wrong with that. And like you said, I don't think it takes anything away from you. The next question that we have is from Eva. How can one minimize negative, critical facial expressions? So I'll go first, since I can think of it more of like a body language communications question. But the way I see it is, well, and Gemma, you might resonate with this one, it's that awareness, right? Just being aware that perhaps, and this is kind of like, if you're just in a neutral environment, right? Like, how are you carrying yourself, right? Do you notice that you tend to just slouch a lot, right? When you're in these calls or if you're interacting with people, or do you tend to notice that, you're crossing your arms, which can indicate something, right? Or if you're, if you're talking about facial expressions, does your face naturally kind of like, you furrow your eyebrows, but it's not because you're angry or you don't agree. That's just like kind of how your facial expression naturally lies, right? So I think if this is something that you want to be mindful of, it's just quick things. So like at home, and this is what I've actually told clients to do. If they want to, come off, and this is what they want. They want to come off more warm and more genuine. I tell them just write a small sticky note. Just say smile, put it on your, screen, and it just reminds you to do that. I think early on I had to remind myself to, because for me, if I'm not talking or interacting, I tend to just kind of sit like this. And it's not because I'm angry, it's just because I'm just like listening, right? So, but for me, I'm trying to make sure that I'm giving the person I'm interacting with the best experience as they can. And this is to show that I'm attentive, right? I'm listening. So for me, I'm making sure that I'm smiling, I'm nodding my head, right? And I mean, it's because I'm also very interested. I'm very engaged. So just being mindful of that has made a huge difference in, what the other person feels when they're interacting with me. Do you have anything to add there, Gemma?
It is, again, all about perspective and putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and just keep reminding yourself that other people can see you. And we all do it. There's, we can't be performing all day, every day. And it could be at home or it could be in a work environment. Sometimes, you kind of slip, you're a bit tired, or sometimes I like, even my husband yesterday was like, you look completely disengaged what I'm saying. And I was like, I'm not, I'm really tired, sorry. And I was kind of like, oh, sorry, no, I was. And I thought I'd answered, but actually I hadn't even answered. He'd asked me a question. I had answered in my head. But I guess that that happens when we don't know what's happening as well. And I think in a work environment, it's important to remember, whenever you've got people around you, whether it be face to face, like in a physical, in the same place, or virtual, you are on display and people can see you. And it can be tiring and it can be exhausting. And depending on the environment, sometimes it doesn't matter if it's like really informal, when these people are kind of friends with you, that's fine. But if you're sitting in an important meeting, you've got to give those social cues that you're engaged, listening, motivated, and that does involve having a bit of a smile on your face sometimes. I've had to really train myself to kind of have a little smile on my face.
Yeah.
Even, rather than just like a blank face, which would be a lot easier. So I think it's practice as well, and just keep reminding yourself that other people can see you, even if they're not giving you the impression they can, because they're not staring straight at you, that, we're picking up cues about people all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. So I know we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I'm just going to ask this one question that I'm seeing here. So this one is, in a first meeting, when should we close a conversation such that it is well balanced and also doesn't get too overwhelming for the other person? How do you strike that balance? So I guess, how do we end a meeting at the right time, perhaps, is what I'm also kind of getting from this question. How do we end at the right time so you're still leaving a really good impression and not overwhelming somebody? I actually think this is actually a very good emotional intelligence question, because you have to be hyper aware of how the other person perhaps is feeling. Can you tell that they are starting to, disengage? And then how do you react to that? Do you have anything you want to add to this question, this specific questions, Gemma?
I think that obviously it's picking up on social cues. So does someone look like they're kind of, I can tell when I'm in a meeting with someone, and I can see them kind of start to look away a bit. I can see they're checking their emails, or their calendars popped up. And if it's on the hour as well, or half hour, that they're probably thinking about what they need to do next. So I think pick up on those cues.
Yeah.
But also sometimes you need to finish things at a time that's right for you. So I guess be clear about that at the start. So we've got 30 minutes, we've got half an hour, or, I'm really excited to spend this next hour with you, or 30 minutes with you. But also check in as well. If you see someone kind of looking a bit distracted, or you can kind of check in and say, should we continue this later, or is that enough for now? Like, I don't want to go into too much detail now. Maybe we can check in on this later. Ask the question, ask for feedback, and see what comes back.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think asking the question to kind of like either ask them how they're feeling, or, to re-engage them in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really good point. And, if you sense that, perhaps they are starting to get distracted, or, perhaps it has been, quite a while already, just ending and say like, hey, this is a really good conversation. Let's schedule another time to talk about it, or let's pick up this conversation next time, right? There is this saying, and what is that saying, that, you don't want to, you want to kind of keep the magic there as well, right? So you don't want to, if you have a whole hour, perhaps you don't need to use a whole hour, right? So it's just kind of, again, that emotional intelligence, just being mindful of the other person. So I know we only have 2 minutes left. So I first of all, thank you everybody for your questions. I'm sorry if we couldn't get to your questions because I know we have to kind of wrap up this, but I want to thank everybody who was here, who joined us in and out of our conversation. Gemma, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
So definitely on LinkedIn. So if you search Gemma Leigh Roberts, it'll pop up on LinkedIn and the Resilience Edge website. But I think LinkedIn is probably the first port of call because you can find everything from there.
I love LinkedIn as well. I mean, that's how you and I connected. So similarly, yeah, if you guys aren't following me already, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the platform I'm most active on. And our website is soulcastmedia.com. But is there any other last parting words, Gemma, that you want anybody to know or anybody to kind of take away with them?
Just remember it's a journey and we're all working on this. There's different tweaks we can put in place. We can test things, we can get feedback, we can change our communication whenever we want to. So, like we said earlier, be kind to yourself if it doesn't go entirely to plan. And just understand we're all a work in progress. We're all constantly evolving, and that's good.
Yep, and I completely agree with that statement. Communications is also a journey, right? I'm teaching communications, but I will always admit that I'm still learning communications because, communications in the situations you find yourselves in is ever changing. You're never going to be talking with the exact same person in the exact same situation, right? So you're always learning. So with that, I'm going to end our LinkedIn Live. I want to again thank everybody who was here today, who watched us, who stayed with us for the last hour. I appreciate your time. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Gemma, you can reach out to me. And for those, we will be doing a lot more of these Soulcast Media Live. So hopefully you guys are enjoying it. But with that, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.